This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning, everyone. Now I'm here to present a topic by name chest radiograph and its interpretation. Myself, I'm Dr. Mohana from the Department of Radiology, final year postgraduate. Now, even before we jump into what is actually a chest radiograph, what are the different radiographic densities within a chest radiograph, we'll have to know that first. Now, see what actually happens in a chest. While taking a radiograph is that you oppose those radiographic rays. When that happens, different soft tissues or different body parts obstruct in a different way. Like if you take, for example, the bone, it tends to obstruct almost all the rays that are coming in its way. So it is white or opaque on a radiograph. Now, if it comes to a soft tissue, it tends to obstruct like more than half of the rays that are coming in its way. So it seems like not lucent, not of opaque density. It is more like mixture. Okay. And then when it comes to air, it tends to allow all the radiographic rays that are passing through it. So it is basically very lucent. Now, when it comes to air, you can see that the radiographic density is like this. It is almost black. When it comes to metal, it is almost white. I mean, it is very opaque. And then of the medium density are the soft tissue, the fluid. You cannot actually differentiate them on the radiograph because all of them have a similar radiographic density. When it comes to bone and metal, they are more opaque. And of course, the metal is more opaque than the bone. And when it comes to fat, it is of lesser opacity than the soft tissues and fluid. So next we have the views of radiograph. So all of you might have already known that we take multiple views, but the most important ones among those are PA view, which is the post-anterior view, and next is the AP view, and next the lateral view and the lateral decubitus view. So you have to have a clear idea that in a single radiographic view, you should not be trying to depict all the pathology and try to find the diagnosis what is there. You always have to go for different views in order to be sure of your diagnosis. Now when it comes to PA view, now this is a properly exposed no normal PA view chest radiograph. Now here what happens is the patient is opposed adjacent to the radiographic film on which the image is captured, and the rays pass from behind him. Okay. And then the patient, this is a typical radiographic PA view position of the patient, with the patient flexes his elbow and places his hand behind his lower back. So that what actually happens when the patient is in this position is that his scapula, which actually tend to overlap the radiograph here, will be positioned away from the chest field. No, so here you can actually not see the scapula. The scapula have, due to the positioning of the hand of the patient, the scapula have actually moved away from the lung fields. Now the lung fields are made even more clear. So, and then we also have to note that the patient neck position is in a hyperextension. So when this patient is placing his head in hyperextension, you can clearly view the apices of the lung. So apices are actually called the hidden areas of the lung. When there is any pathology, and if the patient is tending to flex his head, flex his neck, the soft tissues of the neck tend to overlap with the apices, and you will be missing the pathology that is present in the apices of the lung. Okay. So this is the basic and the most important view you should be able to know, and this is the actual view that we will try to interpret also in the later slides. So basically this is a standard view for routine chest x-rays, and this is taken in full inspiration. And usually patients that are advised for a PA view are usually not morbid, or they do not have any comorbidities, or they usually can get up themselves. They're mobile enough to go to the department and get their X-ray done by themselves. And next we have the AP view, which is the anteroposterior view. in which the patient is either too ill to stand or he is not cooperative. Like, almost all the patients that are present in ICU, they are not mobile enough to get themselves to the department, I mean radiology department, and get an X-ray done. So they rather a bedside X-ray is done for them, and the patient lies in a the patient lies in a supine position, and this is a way of the patient is exposed. That this is a radiographic film, and then this is where it is capturing. This is also known as a cassette, and then this is the patient is asked to place his arms or hands above the level of the head, and if the patient is able to sit, this is the way you do an anteroposterior radiograph. So what actually happens in this anteroposterior radiograph is that heart is actually slightly anteriorly placed, and then cause of this projection, it tends to give an apparent increase in the size of the heart. So almost always there is a increase in the size of the heart, and you should not tend to comment cardiomegaly even if you strongly think that there is enlargement of the cardiac shadow. AP view is not the right option for, I mean, not the right film for you to comment cardiomegaly. You always have to have a PA film in order to comment cardiomegaly. Okay, next. The heart is almost always at a greater distance from the film, right? See, here the heart is actually placed a bit anteriorly in the mediastinum, and it is a bit farther from the film. So what actually happens is the rays, they do not come in this way, they come in this way. And when the heart is placed anteriorly, the shadow tends to get opacified because the rays are coming this way. Obviously the heart is anterior. If the heart is even more anterior, the cardiac shadow tends to be even more increased. That point you always have to keep in mind before you comment on the size of the heart in an AP view. Okay, and the other thing that I would like to mention is that, see, because of the position of the hands, see here the patient is just putting his hands beside him, so the scapulae tend to overlap the lung fields. See here the scapulae are actually overlapping the lung fields. If there is any pathology here, maybe say a pulmonary nodule or a lung mass or some fracture or something, you tend to miss it because of the overlapping scapular shadows. Now, this is a clear view of how you can actually differentiate to a posterior view from an anteroposterior view. This is one basic thing you should know before you finish your undergraduation. And in a PA view, there is always the clavicle is over the lung fields, whereas in an AP view, it is always above the lung apex. Next, the scapula are away from the lung fields, as I already mentioned, and then in an AP view, they are over the lung fields. The ribs are usually the posterior ribs are distinct, the anterior ribs are distinct. What is meant by distinct is that the things that you're able to be clearly appreciate, that is what is meant by the word distinct here. So, and then the heart. The heart is relatively enlarged, as I've already told you. The heart has an apparent enlargement, which is not an actual enlargement. So you have to go for a PA view to comment on the size of the heart. Now this is a lateral view. No, in many cases, you use a lateral view to clarify your doubts. When in a PA view, you're not able to appreciate the pathology properly and diagnose properly, you go for a lateral view, where you can clearly assess the plane of the pathology. So here, lung lobes, mediastinum, bony thoracic cavity are better visualized, of course, and useful for the lobar pathology, mediastinal masses, encysted pleural fluid, and basal consolidations. Now, this is the position of the patient for a lateral view radiograph. Now, what is this view? Okay, we have seen AP view, PA view, lateral view, and what exactly is this lateral decubitus view? Now, we actually have two types of lateral decubitus again. It can either be right lateral decubitus or it can either be left lateral decubitus. So basically, when we are suspecting some pathology in the right hemithorax or in the left hemithorax, we go for these lateral decubitus view or left lateral decubitus view. Whenever it is a right lateral decubitus view, the patient is asked to lie on his right side, such that now here he is actually lying on his right side, and the pathology here is that there is actually fluid, that there is a effusion. There is effusion that is tending to due to the gravity, it is taking a lower position, And if we are actually missing, we tend to miss this fluid on a PA or AP view. When the patient is erect in position, the fluid basically opacifies the entire hemithorax. Now here, what is actually happening is all the fluid is tending to collect to a dependent position, and it is giving a fluid level also. So in this way, we can actually clear our doubt. If we are seeing any unilateral hemithorax opacification, we can go for a further lateral decubitus view to confirm the diagnosis. Next parameter is that exposure. Okay, so basically there will be a few things we have to know before we go and comment on a pathology of a pathology on a radiograph. See, the one such factor is exposure. So whenever you are exposing the patient to the radiograph, X-rays, whenever there is adequate exposure, like there is perfect exposure, the intervertebral spaces are barely visible through the heart shadow. That you have to remember. See, now here you are able to see the cardiac shadow, and then the intervertebral spaces are like very clearly seen, right? So what is actually this? This is an overexposed film. You are very clearly able to appreciate the intervertebral spaces. That means it is an overexposed film. So, but here, when you try to read this film, you are not at all able to appreciate the intervertebral spaces, not even the ribs that are actually behind or anterior to the cardiac shadow. We are not able to appreciate. That means this is an underexposed film. Okay, if I think but here we are actually able to appreciate the intervertebral spaces like minimally, not too much, it is not like not at all, it is barely visualized. So this is an adequate exposed film. So here we have the differences. In an overexposed film, we have what is wrong? Okay, so in an overexposed film, we have the intervertebral spaces clearly visible through the heart shadow. So here we can clearly see the intervertebral spaces through the heart shadow. And in an underexposed film, the intervertebral spaces are not very clearly seen. Okay. So there's a mistake here. The intervertebral spaces are not very clearly seen over here. Okay, I think that's it. Next. Our next parameter is rotation. Now we have seen exposure. You have to be aware that the technician is not going to know everything while he's going to expose a patient to the X-rays. He is just going to take a radiograph, and you are the one who have to be able to differentiate whether it is a technical error or is there any actual pathology. That difference should be crystal clear, and we should be able to point that out. So another such parameter where there can be a technical error and which can lead to misinterpretation of any pathology is rotation. So whenever you want to look for rotation on a radiographic film, just draw a line that is connecting all the spinous processes of all the vertebra. We can actually see the spinous processes pretty clear if this line is, or if this line wasn't there. So you actually draw a line that is connecting all the spinous process of all the vertebra, and then you will draw lines away from that line to the medial ends of the clavicle. If these are, if the clavicles are equidistant from this line that is drawn in the center, that means there is no rotation, and the technician has been pretty experienced, and he has done a good film without any rotation of the patient. Sometimes we cannot even blame the technician. It can also always be the patient's disability or something that is causing rotation, and he's unable to move or something. So here this is a well-centered film, and there is an equal distance between the medial end of the clavicle and this line. Okay. Next, the another factor we should also look for is good inspiration. You always advise the patient to the technician to take the film in a very good inspiration, that is full inspiration. What exactly full inspiration means is that you have to be able to see 10 posterior ribs and 6 anterior ribs on a radiographic film. So what actually is that is these are the anterior ribs. One, so you just count your anterior ribs, 1 2 3 4 5 6. Now you're able to see 6 anterior ribs, and almost the anterior aspect of the 6th anterior rib is also seen. That means this is a good inspired film. No, the patient has taken full inspiration at the time of exposure. That is what it means. Now when you look at the posterior end of each rib. Now this is the posterior end. Okay, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8. Okay, now we are able to see approximately 8 to 10 posterior ribs should be visible. That is how you say it is a well inspired film. Now on an expiration film, it is just the reverse. Okay, so what is actually happening here is you can see that the hemithorax, this vertical diameter of the hemithorax will be reduced, and the anterior ribs will be like somewhere between 3 or 4 will be visualized, and posterior ribs somewhere between below 8. Below 8, if it is visualized, you can call it a film taken in expiration, or even a mid expiration film. Okay, and what the problem with these expiration films is that during expiration there will be increase of blood flow to the lungs, and whenever it tends to pacify the lung, the lung is pretty loosened, the air fields are the lung field can be clearly commented upon. If you want to, you can comment upon the lung fields very surely, very confidently. But if the lung is like this, the lung fields are like this, the patient is in expiration, it is almost everything is filled with blood, and it is almost opacified. You cannot comment, even if you want to, on if there is a pathology. You cannot comment confidently that there is a pathology due to this. So you always have to advise the technician to take the radiograph in a full inspiration. So what all we have seen is that we have have to look for the exposure, and then full inspiration, or inspiration or expiration film, and also what have we seen, rotation of the film. These are the major technical factors you should look for before you get into reading a chest X-ray. Okay. So this is a normal chest X-ray. It is very well centered. These are the spinous processes. When you draw a line and to the medial ends of the clavicle, the medial ends of the clavicle are equidistant from this interspinous line, and the lung fields are very clear. These are the normal bronchovascular markings. Okay, these are the normal bronchovascular markings. In a normal chest radiograph, the bronchovascular markings are not usually visualized in the peripheral 1/3 of the X-ray. And then what else? We have spoken about the centering. That is, it is a well-centered film, and this is a PA radiograph where the scapulae are placed away from the lung fields. And we have also seen that this is a well exposed film, because the intervertebral spaces are like barely seen through the cardiac shadow. Okay, that these are the technical factors one should look for. Next, how do you actually interpret each part of the radiograph? Now this has an ABCDEFG approach, where A stands for airway, B stands for bones and soft tissues, C stands for cardiac shadow, diaphragm, effusion, and lung fields. E stands for effusion, F stands for field, that is a lung fields, G stands for gastric bubble, and H stands for the hyla and mediastinum. Now when you go this way, you tend to not miss any of the pathology. Like you tend to not miss looking at any of the structure in a radiograph, and obviously you won't miss any pathology. Okay, let us just have a brief review. Now this is the airway, which I told A. This is the airway, that is nothing but the trachea, and then it comes, and then it divides into right and left main bronchus. Until here it is pretty visible, and later on, obviously, due to its density, it is not visible, not very visible. and sometimes there can be some tracheal ring calcifications, which makes it even more visible on a radiograph. This is a cardiac shadow. This is the arch of the aorta, and due to this arch of aorta, we have the aortic knuckle here, and then you have the pulmonary trunk here. And of course, these fissures are not very visualized on the radiograph. And then you have to look for also I have to look for the bony and the soft tissue structures. This is all the soft tissue adjacent to the chest wall, which is the chest wall. And you have the bony structures, that is nothing but the upper end of the humerus, visualized part of the clavicle, and scapula. Or whenever there is history of trauma or any or significant history, you can just look for presence of some fractures. Clearly visualize the presence of some fractures by visualizing the breach in the cortex of the bone. And of course, I don't have to tell you, you also have to look at the ribs for the presence of any fractures. This is how you actually count ribs, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This is how we actually do the counting of the ribs. So this is the hilum. Okay, what are the hilar structures? Pulmonary artery, the right and left main bronchus. Sometimes there can be a few lymph nodes, and the main hilar structures are these. And what else do you want to look on a lateral view? You have to look for the cardiac opaque. This is a cardiac shadow. This will be the left ventricular shadow. And then you have the trachea, the lucent thing here is the trachea, just behind it will be the esophagus, and just and these are the thoracic vertebrae. And one thing you have to know is that the thoracic vertebrae tend to have increased lucency as you go down. Okay, one very important sign you have to remember. This thing is very important. And these are the lung apices. The esophagus here you can note is just posterior to the trachea. This is the trachea and this is the esophagus. Of course, these both of them are potential air-filled cavities only, but the esophagus, always tends to collapse in the anterior posterior direction. Whenever it is not distended, it is just collapsed. It is just a potential cavity, whereas trachea is always open. It is always air-filled, and it does not collapse, except that in inspiration it tends to enlarge, and in expiration there will be a slight decrease in the diameter. Okay, and you also look at the postophrenic angles, the ribs, the posterior ribs. These are the posterior ribs. These are the pedicles. This is the hilar region. This is the cardiocapacity. Well, moving further, next we have to look at the airway. So I have already told you A stands for airway, and this is the trachea. These are the right and left main bronchi. This is the carina. Almost at the level of T4, there is a tracheal division, and the point of division is called the carina. And tracheal opacity. This is the tracheal lucency that we'll look for on a lateral radiograph. So next, moving on to the anatomy of the lung. So basically, we already know that the right lung has 3 lobes and the left lung has 2 lobes. The right lung has a major fissure, which is also known as the oblique fissure, and a minor fissure, which is also known as a horizontal fissure. And the left lung has only one fissure, which is the horizontal fissure. Okay. So this is how we actually divide the lung lobes. So this is the right upper lobe. Now these lines actually are not the fissures. On a radiograph, we cannot say these are the fissures, but these are some imaginary markings where we will be able to delineate between the lobes. This is the right upper lobe. This is the right lower lobe. And when you want to look for a right middle lobe, I always say the one that is just adjacent to the cardiac shadow is the right middle lobe. However, you can better appreciate it on the lateral radiograph. Here, this is the right middle lobe between the oblique fissure and the horizontal fissure. Now, this is the major fissure. sorry, this is the major fissure, which is the oblique fissure. This is the minor fissure, which is a horizontal fissure. In between both of these, you have the middle lobe. This is the upper lobe. It is not very difficult to see when you have this lateral radiograph and compare with this lateral radiograph. The one that is just above here is the right upper lobe. And what did I say? From here, like approximately T4, T5, from that vertebra till the costophrenic angle, if you draw a line like this, and this will be the right middle lobe. Here you can see this is the right middle lobe, and just posterior to it will be the right lower lobe. Superior to it will be the right upper lobe. This is how you can divide the lobes, and if you find any pathology, you can just contribute it to that lobe. Especially pathologies like consolidation, they tend to be more lobar. So you can actually contribute it to that lobe and easily identify the sign. Next, this is the left lung anatomy, where you have only a single fissure, which is nothing but the oblique or the major fissure. And approximately from the level of the T3, T4 spinous process, it tends to extend across the hilum up to the costophrenic angle, and superior to it is present the left upper lobe, and inferiorly is present the left lower lobe. Of course, on a AP radiograph, it is pretty difficult to differentiate a left upper lobe from a left lower lobe. However, it is always known that the left upper lobe has, it tends to occupy from the level of the apex till almost the lowermost part, like till the diaphragm, the left upper lobe. See here also you can see that the left upper lobe is almost occupying from the level of the apex of the lung to the level of the hemidiaphragm or the costophrenic angle, and below it is the left lower lobe. Okay, next. So apart from the actual lobar division, which is based upon the fissures that are present in the lung, which are actual, they are truly anatomical structures. Apart from that, we also have a division that is based upon few imaginary lines, that we draw on the radiograph. So we are actually drawing two lines. One is two lines in order to divide all of the bilateral hemithoraces into three zones: upper, mid, and lower zones. Now, above the level of the second rib, it is called the upper zone. And from the level of the second rib to the below the level of the fourth rib, it is called the middle zone. And from the below level of the fourth rib, like when I mean fourth rib, I mean the anterior aspect of the rib. Okay, we already have learned that there you can approximately see 6 anterior ribs. I mean, anterior aspect of up to the sixth rib can be visualized. So
Ma'am, we can't hear you, ma'am. Ma'am, it's not audible, ma'am.
And then the left ventricle forms the left border of the heart, and this small thing that is present here forms the superior part of the left border of the heart. This is nothing but left atrial appendage. This is the left atrial appendage, or also left auricle. Next you have the what else is actually forming the border of the heart. Next, the superior vena cava is seen forming here superiorly, and here it is the knob of the aorta, and then you have the pulmonary artery, and then you have the left atrial appendage. Left atrial appendage. Now, small thing that we tend to miss is that this inferior vena cava, which is actually opening into the right atrium here. Now, this border of the heart inferiorly is formed by the inferior vena cava, whereas this border of the heart superiorly is formed by the superior vena cava. Okay, this is very important when it comes to a radiograph. You have to remember all these borders. Now, what is wrong? I'm unable to move the slide also. Okay. What is wrong, man? How do I actually remove all this? Okay. So this is the same thing that is depicted on a lateral radiograph here. So here, okay, yeah. So here here, okay. Okay. Here you can see that the right atrium is forming the right heart border, and the IVC a bit inferiorly, and the superior vena cava a bit superiorly. But here, what is actually happening on the lateral radiograph is that your anterior border is formed by the right ventricle. Okay, and inferiorly it is formed by the left ventricle. Huh? రావట్లేదా ఎవరు రెస్పాండ్ అవ్వట్లేదు
పవన్ కళ్యాణ్
మ్యామ్ ఇప్పుడు వినిపిస్తుంది మ్యామ్, ఇందాక కట్ అయ్యింది మ్యామ్ కొంచెం వాయిస్.
Okay, so on a lateral radiograph, the right ventricle, okay, which semester students are you?
9th sem మ్యామ్.
Okay. So this is the right ventricle that is forming the anterior border of the heart on a lateral radiograph, and then you have the left ventricle inferiorly, and almost left ventricle and the left atrial appendage and the inferior vena cava together form the posterior border of the heart. Now, why are we actually learning these relations is that whenever the heart enlarges, or if there is any disturbance in the relationship between these structures, like if there is any disturbance in the relationship between the left ventricle and the inferior vena cava, you will be able to identify that there is a left ventricular enlargement. Now, if the left ventricle is going way beyond the inferior vena cava, the inferior vena cava is situated here, and the left ventricle and the left atrium are going like here. The heart border is not seen here; it is like seen here or something. You can recognize the enlargement of the heart pretty well, and then appreciate it better. This is the same thing that I've already told you. This is a pulmonary artery which is catching its heart, and then you have the right ventricle forming the anterior border. Similarly here, this is the right ventricle that is forming the anterior border. The left ventricle and the left atrium together form the posterior border. This is the trachea here, and just posteriorly will be the esophagus. And then the aorta, this is the aorta, arch of the aorta, if you can appreciate. This is very clearly seen here. This is the arch of aorta. Okay. And one more thing we have to be trying to notice is the right pulmonary artery and the left pulmonary artery. I know both of these are not very clearly visualized on the lateral radiograph, but one thing you can remember is that the right pulmonary artery is at a bit lower level than the left pulmonary artery. Next thing we are going to learn is Silhouette sign. So what exactly is a Silhouette sign? No, this is basically a misnomer, because in this thing there is loss of Silhouette. What is happening? Why is there loss of Silhouette? Now, whenever there is a pathology in the lung field, and it is when the pathology is of the same density as that of the cardiac shadow, as that of the heart, and if it is an anatomic contact with the heart, you cannot appreciate the right heart border. That is called as loss of Silhouette of the right heart border. That is loss of visualization of the right heart border. That itself is loss of Silhouette of the right heart border. Whenever there is a pathology like if there is right middle lobe collapse, say example, if there is a right middle lobe collapse, the complete lung has collapsed. I mean, the complete lobe, the right middle lobe has collapsed, and there is no air getting into it, and it is so much opacified and seems white on the radiograph. And when it comes to contact with the right heart border, you can no longer visualize the right heart border. So that then you can call it loss of Silhouette of the right heart border, and that is called as Silhouette sign positive. You might actually have a doubt when there is loss of Silhouette, why is it called as Silhouette sign positive? But that is how it is, and I already told you that is a misnomer. So you can just go by that. And then based on the Silhouette sign, there are what is the basic advantage of this Silhouette sign is that see, at the heart is placed, if the heart is placed like this within the thoracic cage, and if there is a some opacity just adjacent to the cardiac, I mean, this is the cardiac shadow, and there is an opacity just adjacent, and if it is coming in contact with the heart, and it is of the same radiographic density, now how you cannot visualize this heart border? Okay, you cannot visualize this heart border, and it is like a mixed density. I mean, you cannot just delineate the border of either this mass or this heart, and that is called loss of Silhouette. And you can tell that this pathology, whatever this lung mass is present, it is present in the plane of the heart, in just the plane of the heart, and is having the same almost the same density of the heart. Okay, for example, if it is placed somewhat anteriorly, or if it is placed somewhat posteriorly to the heart, the borders of the heart, neither the borders of the heart nor the borders of the pathology will be obscured. You can clearly see through and through. The borders are seen through and through. You can visualize both the border of the heart and also border of the pathology. So you can say that the pathology is not in the plane of the heart. It is somewhere behind, or either anterior. It is either anterior, giving through and through appearance, or it is posterior. So that way the Silhouette sign is very, very useful for a radiographic interpretation. So for example, if there is right upper lobe collapse, I already told you the right upper lobe is somewhere here. Okay, and then this is your ascending aorta. Okay, when there is a right upper lobe collapse, it tends to just come here, and there will be loss of Silhouette of the right, I mean, ascending aorta. You have to suspect right upper lobe collapse. Then whenever there is loss of Silhouette of the right middle lobe, I mean, sorry, the right heart border here, you have to suspect right middle lobe collapse. And when there is any right, see, you can clearly see it in the table here. Whenever there is right lower lobe collapse, and there is loss of Silhouette of the right hemidiaphragm, that is very clear that it is a lower lobe collapse, because with the loss of Silhouette of the loss of Silhouette of the right hemidiaphragm, the pathology is almost always right lower lobe collapse. And with the left upper lobe, with the left upper lobe collapse, I already told you the left upper lobe is one occupying like almost the entire left hemi thorax. So there will be loss of Silhouette of the aortic knuckle and also the left heart border. So you can no longer visualize the aortic knuckle or the main pulmonary artery border or the left heart border. Now next, you have the left hemidiaphragm. Whenever there is, I told you the left lower lobe will be somewhere here. So whenever there is a collapse of the left lower lobe, there will be loss of Silhouette of the left hemidiaphragm. So next thing we are going to see is how do you appreciate a cardiomegaly, or how do you tell there is cardiomegaly on a chest radiograph. It is very simple. You just draw a line in the midline that is connecting all the spinous processes, and then an internal thoracic diameter, a line that is measuring the internal thoracic diameter. This is the line, the maximum internal thoracic diameter measured. So cardiothoracic ratio is nothing but the ratio of these, the sum of the distance from this midline to the right heart border. A perpendicular line is drawn, and then another perpendicular line is drawn from the midline to the left heart border, and these distances are basically summed up. This gives the cardiac diameter, and this is the internal thoracic diameter. Now the cardiac diameter divided by the internal thoracic diameter gives you the cardiothoracic ratio, and the normal cardiothoracic ratio is less than 0.5. Now whenever it's greater than 0.5 in an adult, it is considered cardiomegaly, and this has to be given only on a PA radiograph and not an AP radiograph, because I already told you in an AP radiograph there will be apparent increase in the size of the heart. Okay, and next we have the diaphragm. So basically the right hemidiaphragm is usually approximately at 2 centimeters or 2 to 3 centimeters placed above the level of the left hemidiaphragm. One thing you always have to remember, it is not either some palsy, it is not any pathology. This is always normal. Okay, next these are the various angles that you look for: the right costophrenic, the left costophrenic angle, and this is the cardiophrenic angle, this is the right cardiophrenic angle. Now these angles are also basically important. Whenever there is obliteration of the angle, either due to a pleural effusion or some mass, you have to be able to identify. And this is the hila. This is the right pulmonary artery. This is the left pulmonary artery, casting their opacities, their shadows. And this is the trachea. You have the right pulmonary artery a bit lower than the left pulmonary artery. Already told you. Here, if you see, the right pulmonary artery is a bit lower than the left pulmonary artery. Is lower than the left pulmonary artery, and the bronchus here is a bit above the right pulmonary artery, whereas on this side you have the left main bronchus a bit lower than the left pulmonary artery. The next thing is mediastinum. What exactly is mediastinum is that it is just the space that is present between the two lungs. Now this space basically between the two lungs contains multiple structures. Now what are those structures, or what are the contents of the mediastinum is that the heart, the trachea, the esophagus, and the thymus. Now all these structures are few lymph nodes, great vessels. Now all of these structures are the structures that are present between the two lungs. Now the space that is present bounded anteriorly by the sternum, posteriorly by the vertebrae, inferiorly by the hemidiaphragm. But this space itself constitutes mediastinum, and this space contains multiple structures, as I've already told you. And whenever there is some widening of the mediastinum, it has to be reported, because there is some pathology of the mediastinal structure. So mediastinum width greater than 6 centimeters on an erect PA view or 8 centimeters on a supine AP view is considered abnormal. Okay. Now these are the various mediastinal masses you can think of whenever you see a mediastinal lesion. So anteriorly, I don't want you to memorize all this, but you have to remember a few. Anteriorly, what are the structures of the antemediastinum is that you have a thyroid, you have a thymus, so these can enlarge. So that thing you have to remember. You will have few lymph nodes, and lymphoma can also be present, and then teratoma can be there. And next, when we move on to the middle mediastinum. Middle mediastinum, you have lymph nodes, which is lymphadenopathy is the most common pathology that you can see here, and the aortic aneurysms, pericardial cysts, dilated esophagus, and hiatal hernia are the other pathologies. Okay, I think we shall just wind up the session over here, and I just like to thank you. I hope this presentation has brought at least some knowledge to you guys. Okay, then I'll just wind the session here. Thank you.